Hello. We are going to do some teaching, a lecture on the text Senso and D'Angelo entitled, it's by the author Senso and D'Angelo entitled, Is Everyone Really Equal? This is going to specifically focus on chapter 4 of Is Everyone Really Equal? For my courses, some of my students are reading through this text, and we thought it would be helpful if we would outline these chapters, certain chapters. This will be chapter 4, again, of Is Everyone Really Equal? And so let us pull up our PowerPoint so you can see what my screen and see where I'm at. You can follow along. Okay. So the title of the chapter is Prejudice and Discrimination. Prejudice and discrimination. Now, these two words, believe it or not, have been becoming increasingly controversial to teach. It's interesting because often we associate prejudice and discrimination with race and ethnicity. And anytime we have conversations about race and ethnicity, people get defensive and uncomfortable. Well, the reason why there seems to be an overemphasis on race and ethnicity is because we have struggled with it in this country. I don't have to remind folks that there has a history of enslavement in this country. Can you imagine that in this country, the United States, it was legal to enslave people and force them into labor and all kinds of things, sexual acts, and people were not humans, they were property. And often any and everything was done to them. All the way up until 1865, and even after that, people had slaves, they owned people even after the end of the Civil War. And so we still struggle with this idea of racial prejudice and discrimination in this country. And so don't be uncomfortable about the conversation. We need to continue to have it. There's still racial tension today. There's a rise of hate groups. There's a rise of the KKK. There's a rise of, in fact, I attend a predominantly African American church, and there have been Ku Klux Klan flyers that has been distributed to some of the traditionally African American churches, and some of them are quite violent. And this is 2025 when I'm recording this lecture, and so we have to understand that information and knowledge is power, and it shines light in the darkness. And there's even oppression among women. One would think we were further along, but there are actually advocates of trying to disenfranchise women and take away the vote from women. I literally heard a politician putting that forth the other day, and I almost fell on my seat. So let us move forward. Opening quote. I was taught, this is page 50 from Is Everyone Really Equal? I was taught never to judge a book by its cover. What are your thoughts on this? I want you to think about this. So were you taught this? And I was taught this too in relation to don't judge people based on their ethnicity, based on where they're from, based on their race, whether they're a man or a woman, whether they are from the LGBT community or what have you. People were you taught not to judge? Well, what does this mean? What does this mean? It's very noble, but at the same time it's limited. Okay. Introduction. The authors argue that prejudice and discrimination cannot be avoided. We all hold prejudices, even myself as a person that teaches a class on multicultural education, as a person that teaches a class on leadership in a diverse society, that teaches class in Black Studies and African American history. I hold prejudices as well. We all discriminate based on our prejudices. It's a natural prejudices. It's a natural aspect of who we are. Our body, our mind often discriminates and makes judgment calls. To be honest, it's somewhat of a safety mechanism. If there is, if we smell smoke walking by a building, we're going to discriminate and say, I'm not going to go in that building. Or if there's somebody walking towards us talking really loudly and threatening us, we're going to walk away from that person. That's a natural mechanism. But at the same time, we also develop negative discriminatory practices by television, by the images we see, even the music we consume, the entertainment, the schools we go to. It reinforces prejudices. The first step in minimizing is to be able to identify rather than deny our prejudices. And going back to this, I was taught never to judge a book by its cover. We often say this as a way to deny that we have any prejudices. But here's the issue. If we're in denial and deny, then we can't work on growing. We can't work on growth. Okay? This class is not about making you feel bad or saying that you are a horrible person. Keep that in mind. As you're reading the book, sometimes you will be challenged as you're reading through this chapter. You'll be challenged and you'll slam the book down or get frustrated and say, this is biased and I don't subscribe to this. But I encourage you to look inward and let's grow as a person, regardless of your political affiliation. We can all agree to the project of human growth and making the world a better place. And so the authors define prejudice, learn prejudgment about members of a social group which we do not belong. So another group, for example, Hispanics, judging people from Mexico, or judging Chinese and making prejudgments without really knowing, or judging white women, or judging white women from Kentucky, Appalachia, or judging a European a man from France, and French people do this, and French people do that, or making judgments, and that could be dangerous without proper knowledge. It's based on limited knowledge or experience with the group, limited experience with the group or limited knowledge. Simplistic judgments and assumptions are made and projected onto everyone from the group. What is discrimination? So we're going to think about prejudice versus discrimination. Action based on prejudice towards social others. So when we act upon our prejudices, that is discrimination. So for example, if we are judgmental and say that, this example, redhead women are really angry and stubborn. I'm just using an example. And that's our prejudice. And then if we begin to treat redhead women abrasively because we have this notion that they are mean and nasty, we've acted upon our prejudgments. When we act on prejudgments, we're discriminating, okay? Here's some discussion questions. Let me make an adjustment here. So I want to think about some things here in terms of these discussion questions. Let me pull them back up so you can see what I'm saying here. Okay. According to the authors, all people have prejudice and all people act or discriminate based on their prejudice. Explain this process. So we've already been talking about that. I'll give you another example. Saying that African American males, I'm a black male, so I'll use my own social group, are angry and not intelligent and criminals. And so if we treat a African American as a criminal, if we act upon that prejudice, that's when you get into discrimination. What is necessary in order to minimize the effects of our discriminatory actions based on our prejudice ideas about social groups? What are ways you can personally do that? So I want you to reflect upon that, and I'll give you some examples on how we can move forward and minimize that. But think about in your own case, what are ways we could minimize our discrimination and prejudice ideas? So having more people, a larger friend group based that are different from you, actual friends, not tokenism, not the token African American male that's a part of your group on the basketball team, and he's the brunt of all the black jokes, and you say, well, he doesn't care. We use the N word around him all the time. He laughs. That doesn't minimize the fact that it's racist and that's discriminatory. But real, true friendships of people different from yourselves, and then also always say go on a listening tour. So I'm a girl dad, so I have and my wife. I ask her a lot of questions. I had a lot of sisters. So even though I'm not a female and I can never be a woman, um, that I have to ask them and not mansplain and give them opportunity to tell me what their struggles might be, or what they're thinking about as women. And then I have to be quiet, and listen to what they're saying. Okay? So, you might say, I don't know anybody that's Hispanic or whatever the case may be, but just make an effort. You can make a good effort to be around people different from yourself. How do people often respond? How do people often respond when their prejudices are pointed out? At typo there. How do people often respond? People are they react violently. Excuse me. Technical difficulties here, but people react in a way that's defensive. That's what I want to say. I don't have a prejudice bone in my body. People often get offended when their prejudices are pointed out. But rather than doing that, let's think about why people might say that. Okay, everybody's not trying to have a gotcha moment and just to be mean and point out people's flaws. Maybe there's something about us that's exhibiting their prejudice. What kind of person is most often depicted in the media as prejudiced? How are they depicted? What kinds of people are depicted as free from prejudice? So think about that, okay? That's a really good question. Cultural norms and conformity. The book highlights this idea of cultural norm. A cultural norm is what we might consider abnormal, may be normal to someone else. So when we think about the larger mainstream society, sometimes we impose those mainstream norms on everybody. But the way people live in Alaska is perhaps completely different from the way we live. What we consider normal in Kentucky or Ohio or Indiana, our way of life may be completely abnormal to someone in Alaska or someone that lives in a desert area like Arizona. Examples of this include personal space, especially as it relates to ethnicity, different cultures like Native American culture, public display of emotions, style of dress, going to college, most people's perception of going to college, working on a farm, handshakes, farm culture. Those that grew up around it or are familiar with a farm culture, it's going to be completely different. Handshakes, hugs, standard English. These are things that one may consider normal and somebody else might consider abnormal. When I was growing up, me and my friends and brothers, we had these elaborate handshakes in the black communities. That's an example. What is your role in relation to groups in which we belong? How do we fit in and or relate to these groups? The groups may include family unit, high school basketball team, church family, or religious group you belong to, middle class neighborhood, racial, ethnic group, college student fraternity or sorority. This is highlighted on page 43. So what is your role in relation to groups that we belong? How do you fit in? Are you a leader in your family? What's your role? You might sing in a choir in your church, or something along that lines. What's your role that you play? There are some group identities here as it relates to diversity, race, class, gender, sexuality, religion, ability, nationality. Ability is the one that gets overlooked often. People have different levels of ability, and sometimes we will impose what we consider normal on a person that has different kinds of abilities, whether they need wheelchair access or whether it's an intellectual disability, whatever the case may be. So I'll stop there. That's all I'll do for chapter 4. Just keep checking these out. They're really helpful and designed for you to learn the material better and just think about things in a deeper way. Until next time.